Is emulation theft? Short answer, nah. Long answer, well, how much time you got? I was browsing Twitter a while ago and I saw a tweet. I wish I could find it. I won't be able to find it. I gotta be more organized about these things. Some guy was arguing that emulation is piracy, it's theft, it's wrong, it's bad. And here's the thing. My take is emulation isn't piracy, really. And I wouldn't care if it were. Let me tell you about my first contact with emulation. It was either 1998 or 1999. And a friend from school had told me that there's a way to play Pokemon on the computer. He knew I was obsessed with Pokemon and with the Game Boy in general, but I didn't have one. So he said, hey, you know, there's a way for you to play Game Boy games on your computer. It's not as much fun as being able to bring your games with you, of course, but you know, it's better than nothing, right? So the next day he showed up to school with a little floppy disk with no cache GB, which was one of the first Game Boy emulators, I believe, and a bunch of ROMs, right? Including Motocross Mania, if I'm not mistaken, and Pokemon Blue. So I played the hell out of that on the computer, and it blew me away that there's a way to actually allow people who have no access to these games to have these experiences. Now, of course, developers need to be compensated for their work. It is work after all. These are people like you and me trying to put food on the table, right? But the thing is, when we discuss emulation today, a lot of these games are, what, 20, 30 years old, right? Like the money that the companies invested in, the artists and programmers, all of these people have been paid off for the work a long time ago. You downloading a copy of Goof Troop for the SNES, this is not really hurting anyone's bottom line, honestly. It takes me back to that old argument on, remember when online piracy started becoming such a big thing that the powers that be needed to make a stand against it? When we talk about piracy, and most importantly, the industry's reaction to piracy, the first thing I think that'll come to most people's minds, if you're of a certain age, is the you wouldn't download a car I guess meme at this point. These were a series of ads that would show up just before you would play. Like if you buy a DVD and then before the movie starts, there was a little ad that would show up before. Actually, you know what? I think there was a little bit of a Mandela effect there, right? The ads were, you wouldn't steal a car. I mean, I obviously would download a car if I could. Maybe one day with 3D printing, we'll be able to download things like that. Can you imagine? Download a car. Yeah, they were trying to equate downloading a game or a movie with stealing something that is a tangible and finite resource, right? When you steal a car, I shouldn't have to explain this, and I'm pretty sure they knew this, right? This is like propaganda. I don't think they truly believed that argument, right? Maybe they did, I don't know. But when you steal a car, you're depriving somebody of that, right? When you download a game, you're not depriving anybody of anything. They're losing potential gains, but that's assuming everybody who downloads these things would have bought the actual game. When we're talking about old games here, right? Because like, I want to make this clear. If we're talking about like downloading games that like the developers are depending on the revenue from this work to support their family, that's a different situation. But I'm talking specifically about people who get really self-righteous about emulation, like SNES, NES, Sega Genesis emulation. That's a little silly. And I think fundamentally the reason I reject that is not just because I don't think that the only people who should be entitled to experience these games are people who can afford them. It's a really cynical way to look at the world, right? Like the only people who can have these experiences are the people who make enough money to pay for them. It's hard to be on board with that, especially when we're talking about old games that, for the most part, are not even commercially available anymore. Now, obviously that has changed. Nintendo has brought a bunch of games to Nintendo Switch Online. If you're still paying for that, I think I might be. I think it auto-renews. I wasn't supposed to. I shouldn't. I don't even play online on my Switch anymore. And the selection is kind of lame, right? The idea that if, like, for instance, I grew up in Brazil, right? The attitude that I'm not entitled to have these experiences, this shared collective childhood that we all kind of had together, right? Like, no matter where you're from, there's a good chance we had the same kind of experiences playing these games, talking about these games with our friends from school, reading about these games in gaming magazines. The idea that, like, you don't have enough money, your dad doesn't make enough money, too bad, you're excluded from this. I cannot be on board with this. And to say nothing of the notion of owning an idea. Like copyright, I don't mean to be like an anarchist, like no rules should exist because this is just wrong, man. This is not my point, right? But owning an idea, right, is kind of a weird concept. You're taking an idea, and in this case, like, you know, you created a game, right? An old game. I want to make this clear. I don't want it to sound like I'm saying pirate everything. Screw creators. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking specifically about people who get all up in arms, all self-righteous, calling people who enjoy emulation thieves. And I haven't even touched on game preservation. The problem with letting these companies be the sole arbiter and the sole guardians of this content is that eventually, if it's not worthwhile for them, we will lose that forever. I've been working on a video about mobile games that I used to love that are just, you cannot play them at all, right? Mobile games have been historically a little bit harder to preserve than, say, you know, your average SNES game. And it makes me pretty sad that these experiences are lost forever. And I feel like if companies had their way, that's how it would be for all of these things. Whenever I hear somebody, like, I post pictures of my portable emulators a bunch, right? And then whenever I post a picture of like a Super Mario or like any other classic game that people really, you know, people are very fond of, I get comments like, oh man, I missed that game so much. And I can honestly say, I have never missed Super Mario World because I have never stopped playing Super Mario World. In fact, I was thinking about this the other day. To think of Super Mario World as a childhood game is not even accurate at this point. I played Super Mario World as a kid for what, maybe 2 or 3 years? I've been playing it non-stop my entire adult life, right? So by now, I've had much more experience and contact with this game as an adult than I ever did as a child. And that was only possible due to emulation. I guess what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to this issue, piracy, emulation, game preservation, all of this, I tend to side with whatever makes a bunch of people happy rather than whatever is like, no, this is owned by this company. They're the only ones that can decide where this comes out, where this is available, how much it's going to cost. That's what I'm trying to say, I think. But what do you think? I'm pretty sure that the overwhelming majority of my audience is 100% pro emulation. Emulation was an integral part of my upbringing. It brought me so many friends and so many interesting experiences. So the idea that I'm wrong for enjoying this because a company didn't get to make a little bit more profit off of a 30-year-old game seems ludicrous to me, absolutely ludicrous. And it's crazy that there are some people who side with the companies, with the copyright holders on this. Again, because I know how you guys are, I'm talking about old games specifically. I'm not telling you to go and steal indie games that just came out on Steam like this week. That's not what I'm talking about. Anyway, what do you think about this? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm Izzy, and I'm done. I don't say that anymore. I used to say that, right? I guess I gotta go back to saying that.